A landscape designer in Ohio once measured two identical backyards. Same square footage, same fence line, same everything. But when she asked 100 strangers to guess which yard was bigger, 94 of them picked the same one. The myth nobody tells you, buying more plants, more mulch, or more furniture does not make a small garden feel bigger. Today, I'm breaking down 7 edging hacks that professional landscapers use to trick the eye into seeing more space than is actually there. We're going deep. Real techniques, real materials, real before and after logic, not just buy a border kit. So hit subscribe now so you don't miss the next one. Item 1. Cut a crisp trench edge before you do anything else. The single most underrated tool in a small garden isn't a plant, it's a spade. A trench edge, a simple V-shaped cut between your lawn and your bed, usually 4 to 6 inches deep, creates a clean shadow line that the human eye reads as intentional structure. Without it, grass creeps into beds and beds bleed into grass, and that blurry boundary is what makes a small space look messy and cramped, rather than compact and designed. Professional landscapers call this definition, and it costs nothing but labor. You don't need edging material at all for this one. Just a half-moon edger or a flat spade cut at a 45-degree angle, and you're done in under an hour for most small yards. The trench also acts as a root barrier, physically stopping grass rhizomes from invading your soil, which means less weeding time all season. The surprising fact here is studies on visual perception in landscape design show that a defined edge alone, with 0 other changes, makes viewers estimate a garden bed as up to 20% larger than an identical bed with a blurred edge. That's not a plant, not a fence, not paint, just a cut line. But here's the catch. If you cut that trench edge in a straight line around a small yard, you're actually making a classic mistake that shrinks your space instead of expanding it. That's exactly what's coming up next.
Item 2. Curve your edges, never straight lines, in small spaces. Straight-edged beds are the default because they're easy to cut. But in a small garden, straight lines do something sneaky. They let the eye travel to the end of the line instantly, which tells your brain exactly where the boundary is, and small, fully visible boundaries read as small spaces. Curved edges do the opposite. They interrupt the sight line, so your eye has to travel further and guess what's around the bend. This is the same principle golf course designers and Japanese garden architects have used for centuries. A path or bed edge that curves out of view implies there's more space beyond what you can see, even in a yard that's only 15 feet deep. You don't need a fancy design degree for this. A garden hose laid on the ground is the classic trick professionals use to sketch a natural curve before cutting, because it drapes into soft, organic arcs that a measuring tape never will. The specific detail most people miss: curves should have a minimum radius of about 3 feet. Tighter curves than that start to look choppy and busy instead of flowing, especially in a compact yard where every foot is visible at once. Once your curve is cut, the material you edge it with matters as much as the shape. And hack number 3 is where most budget gardeners waste money on the wrong material entirely. Item 3. Use low, flush edging instead of tall border walls. Homeowners with small yards instinctively reach for tall, scalloped edging or stacked stone borders because they think more structure equals more polish. It's backwards. Tall edging creates a visual wall that chops your yard into segments, and segmented space always reads as smaller than open, continuous space, even when the total square footage is identical. Flush edging, steel, aluminum, or even paver edging installed level with the soil creates a border you can feel underfoot but barely see from a standing viewpoint. This keeps the sightline unbroken across the whole yard, so your eye reads the lawn and bed as one continuous plane rather than 2 chopped up zones. Landscape architects specifically use flush metal edging in urban courtyard gardens for exactly this reason. It's nearly invisible in photos, but does all the structural work of containing mulch and soil. The surprising fact: steel edging, despite looking premium, is often cheaper per linear foot than the scalloped plastic garden center kits most people default to, and it lasts 20+ years without cracking or fading, versus 2 to 3 years for plastic. Quick question for you. When you look at your own yard right now, is your bed edge a clean cut or has the grass started creeping in? Be honest in the comments. And if you're realizing your yard's been missing this invisible structure step, that's exactly why I'd love for you to subscribe. This channel is built around the small, often overlooked details that actually change how a space feels, not just expensive additions. It costs you nothing, and it means you won't miss hack number 6, which is the one that surprises almost everyone.
Item 4. Match edging material to your hardscape, not your plants. Most people choose edging color and material based on what looks pretty next to their flowers. That's the wrong reference point. Your edging should visually connect to your hardscape, your patio, walkway, or house foundation, because repeating a material or tone creates a sense of continuity that makes separate zones of a small yard feel like one cohesive space instead of a patchwork of unrelated decisions. For example, if you have a gray concrete patio, a charcoal, steel, or gray composite edge will visually borrow that same tone and stretch it across the yard, making the whole space feel unified. If your edging instead matches your mulch color, you actually reinforce the boundary between zones rather than dissolving it, which shrinks the perceived space. This is a trick borrowed directly from small home interior design, the same reasoning behind painting trim to match walls in a small room, so the eye doesn't stop at a hard boundary. In landscaping, it's called material echo, and it's one of the cheapest, most overlooked upgrades because it doesn't cost more, it just requires choosing differently. And once your zones feel unified by material, the next hack determines whether your whole yard feels like it flows in one direction or fights itself. Item 5. Angle your bed edges to point toward your focal point. Here's the one most homeowners get backwards. Many people edge their beds parallel to the fence or property line because it feels neat and symmetrical. But in a small yard, parallel edges create a boxy, room-like feeling that emphasizes exactly how small the boundary is. Your eye bounces off the edge and stops. Instead, professional designers angle bed edges so they subtly funnel toward a focal point, a tree, a piece of furniture, a garden ornament, even just the far corner of the yard. This creates what's called a forced perspective line, the same optical technique used in theater set design to make a shallow stage look deep. Your eye follows the angled edge toward the focal point, and that visual journey reads as distance, even in a yard that's only 20 feet across. The surprising fact, it's the exact technique used in narrow urban lot gardens in cities like San Francisco and Boston, where lots are often less than 25 feet wide. Designers deliberately avoid parallel edges because on a narrow lot, parallel lines make the space feel like a hallway rather than a garden. Get this one wrong, and even a perfectly curved, perfectly matched edge can end up boxing your yard in instead of opening it up, which is why the next hack is about timing, not shape. Item 6. Keep edges freshly maintained every 2 to 3 weeks, not just once a season. This is the hack nobody wants to hear because it's not a one-time purchase, it's a habit. A crisp edge starts to blur within 2 to 3 weeks as grass regrows over the trench line, and that blur is gradual enough that most homeowners don't notice it happening until their yard looks cluttered again and they can't figure out why. A professional standard for maintained landscapes, the kind you see in hotel grounds or show gardens, is a re-edge every 2 to 3 weeks during growing season, using either a half-moon edger for trench edges or a string trimmer held vertically for edging material borders. This single 5-minute task, done consistently, does more for the visual size of a small yard than almost any purchase you could make. The surprising fact, landscaping maintenance surveys consistently show edge maintenance as the single most skipped task by homeowners, even below weeding and watering, because it feels cosmetic rather than necessary. But it's precisely because it's cosmetic that it matters so much for how big your space feels. Real talk, how often do you actually re-edge your beds? Never? Once a year? Or are you one of the rare few who does it monthly? Drop your honest answer in the comments. I genuinely read every single one. And if this is the first time you're hearing that edging maintenance matters more than buying new plants, hit that subscribe button now, because next hack, number 7, is the one that ties every single trick in this video together into one simple system. Item 7. Layer edging height gradually from lawn to background. The final hack is about the third dimension, height. Most small gardens have a hard, flat jump, lawn, then immediately tall edging or a tall plant. That abrupt height change creates a visual cliff
cliff that stops the eye and defines the boundary sharply, which, as we now know, shrinks perceived space. Instead, top landscape designers layer height gradually, low, flush edging at the very front, then low ground cover or short plants just behind it, building up to medium height plants and only then the taller background plants or fence. It creates a gentle visual ramp rather than a wall, and the eye glides upward and backward through the layers instead of hitting a flat stop. It's the same principle used in stage and film set design to make painted backdrops feel three-dimensional instead of flat. The surprising fact, this layered approach is sometimes called the theater trick among landscape designers because it's borrowed directly from how stage sets use foreground, midground, and background elements to create depth on a flat surface. And it works precisely because your brain is wired to interpret gradual height changes as physical distance.
Here's the pattern running through every single one of these 7 hacks. None of them require more space, more plants, or more money. Every single trick, the trench cut, the curve, the flush edge, the matched material, the angled line, the maintenance habit, the layered height, works by controlling what your eye does, not by changing what's physically there. Your brain estimates size based on edges, sight lines, and continuity, not a tape measure, which means the difference between a small yard that feels cramped and a small yard that feels spacious was never about square footage at all. It was about definition. Once you start seeing edges this way, you'll never look at a garden bed the same way again. If this video helped you see your yard differently, the next one in this series breaks down 5 lighting placement tricks that make small gardens feel like they glow at dusk. And trust me, hack number 3 in that video uses a $12 tool most people already own. Make sure you're subscribed so it lands right in your feed. Thanks for spending this time with me today. Now go grab that spade, cut one clean edge, and tell me how it looks. I'll see you in the next one.